Welcome back, everybody, to yet another episode here on the Oshay Blogcast channel. I am your host, Oshay Duke Jackson. Just glad to have everybody here in the building with us today. Yes, I got on the same shirt from yesterday in this motherfucker too. It's my YouTube shirt for
back,
today.
everybody, to yet.
But anyways, I got a really good show.
Welcome back, everybody, to yet.
And we have Brother Waymon Brown. Very, very talented brother. He's been on my channel for a few times, man. The brother knows exactly what he's talking about. And we have a really, really good show for the brothers out there. How black men can use systems for success. And again, this is Brother Waymon Brown of the YouTube channel. He reached out to me about a year ago, and we did a few shows. And I'm telling you, it was all great. And it just the only thing that's been kind of holding the brother back is he's been a little bit busy with some of the things that he has to do in his personal life, but he wanted to make it for today. So I'm glad the brother's here. And we're going to go over some strategies for you brothers today, how you can use systems for your success. So again, I want to introduce to some of the others, Waymon Brown. What's going on, Brother Waymon? How you doing today?
Man, what's happening with you, Oshay? And shout out to everybody that's out there. Peace and love to everybody. I'm glad to be back on. It's been a minute. I think the last show me and Oshay did was probably like around, I want to say maybe around November last year. But definitely been behind the scenes grinding, putting some things together and carving out my lane, so to speak, in this whole black manosphere and media space. So a lot of what I've been doing is just really trying to get that organized and orderly, especially since, it wasn't until maybe around July of last year where I was making the decision to kind of purpose a lot of my blogs, content, etc., specifically to the needs of black men. But, we definitely back on it. Definitely been showing support to the streams and being in the chats, popping my head in and out. So just want to give a big up to everybody and hope you're having a good Saturday so far.
All right, brother. And again, thank you so much for coming on and talking to the brothers today. We definitely appreciate your insight. Let me ask you about a little bit about you before we kind of get into the show. For some of those who may not know you, what brought you into what we know as the black manosphere, as a content creator focusing on some issues that African American men are focused on? What brought you into this market?
The major thing was really me just being an observer. I had been following your channel for some time. I had been looking at some other brothers that's in the black manosphere. And, just seeing the positive impact that they were making. And I already had a website that I had and like kind of some podcast that I had did several years ago, like on Blog Talk Radio, where it was basically focused on entrepreneurship in general. And then I decided through, tuning into a lot more streams and following what the brothers was doing on this side of YouTube that I wanted to actually make my content a lot more niche specific. And, of course, being a black man, understanding our struggles and our triumphs as well, I thought it would be fitting. So just thought like, it would be a great opportunity during this time to really help to build on what's already been started by brothers like yourself and the other ones out there.
Okay. And let me ask you this. This is a very interesting topic, very different from anything that I have heard before. How black men can use systems for success. Shout out to some of our African brothers here. I know we have one brother from Kenya in here, one brother from Namibia. Good to see you brothers out here watching the show. So people are all over, brothers everywhere, trying to get this game. Why are you talking about this particular? What brought you to this particular topic today, Brother Waymon?
Yeah, just when I think about specifically the black male media spaces, whether we be content creators or supporters of content, everybody's essentially looking to make strides in the way of self-improvement. And I'm the sort of person that, while I think there's always a lot of options, or a lot of ways to go about doing something, I'm really big on taking very strategic approaches that are very simple, no matter what the area of life is, and just doing things that are really manageable to see a successful endeavor come to life in an area. So to me, it's more about what's manageable. I think the more manageable something is, the higher chances there is in sticking through with it. So I try to usually focus on maybe a handful of elements or less. Usually when I come on, I tend to give maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 points on a certain subject, and then those things I kind of look at as being the difference makers of whatever it is that an individual is trying to pursue in order to see a lasting beneficial change, in order to have something that's sustainable. So today I just thought, I could share some things that we can use in principle just to apply to different areas of our lives in order to kind of give us manageable ways to push forward, to move forward, especially during this time where the conversation is becoming more popularized as far as what are Black men going to do together in basically establishing themselves within the Black populace as its own independent group. And in order to do that, we can have all the ideas in the world, but we also need a way rather to make those things come to life. And I think it's going to be based on the individual responsibility of each person. And I think that using simple systems can help in that endeavor. And so that's kind of like what the idea was behind today's show.
Let me kind of talk to you about, as far as brothers right now who don't use the systems. What are you seeing? Let me kind of go back. I had a little scathing, and shout out to Brother Doug out there for putting your channel in the description. I kind of had a little bit of scathing of brothers last night on the podcast that I took down. And I was kind of scolding the brothers for having so much talent and having so much, skill set. We got a lot of money in our African-American male community. We have all of the things that should put us in the forefront of everything that we should be doing, but we don't have the things that we should have as far as the political respect. What are you thinking what kind of systems are brothers using right now that you see, if any, when you observe African-American male life?
Right. You know what? That's kind of difficult to say, only on the strength that I think, systems, to me, of course you have individuals who are involved in different realms, like the religious leaders, political leaders, etc. But as far as like your kind of your rank and file brother that's doing his thing, trying to keep a roof over his head, he's on his grind, maybe he has a career, profession, etc. To say what systems are we using collectively, as of right now, I don't want to say what isn't in existence, but I will say that I guess to a certain extent I have yet to really see effective systems in action to where we can kind of brothers making changes in that regard. But as far as on an individual level, I'm sure that there are people out there who live very organized lives and use simple processes in order to get end results. And even for me, with understanding the power of systems, it's been a struggle for me as well, because I don't always use them for everything, even though I know that I should and I know how to. So sometimes it's also, just coming with the resolve to be able to decide and say, I know that there is a series of steps I can take, an overall template that I can use to kind of govern things in my life. And it's really about just making a decision and understanding the power of it. But in life, I think when we observe everything around us, they're all operated on systems, whether it's the education system, healthcare, they're all operated on, a top to bottom way of how things get done. And I think that for us, Black men, I don't really think we have the luxury to kind of freestyle it through life anymore. With this stage in the game as a group, we kind of have to be scripted to a certain extent. And I think that if we can all find ways to do something that's daily, that's manageable, that we can see ourselves carrying out, then it'll help us to, stick to it. And then even if we get off course, it'll help us to bring us back to where we're supposed to be at. Okay.
Let's talk about systems for some guys who might not know. Okay. What are you talking about, Brother Waymon Brown? Like, you're talking about these systems. I mean, I know there's a system of white supremacy. I know. What do you mean when you talk about systems? Can you explain what you're talking about? How is that going to apply to me as an African American or Black male?
Right. So systems are things that are essentially designed to work together to achieve a result or a series of results. So, for our purposes, being systemized, so to speak, into success is in large part about crafting a life of satisfactory results through our own concentrated efforts. So it requires us to make evaluations as to what's important to us. And it also encourages the development of having a life's occupation that consists of a series of projects that'll encourage a sense of fulfillment and a sense of joy. And within that also, I think that when we think about that word success, in this particular instance, is not really referring to subscribing to the idea that success is some sort of universal thing among Black men, that everybody has to view success, you know, in the same exact way. So what counts for one person may not count for another. And I think it's important to not allow someone to set those rules up for you, but rather it's about us making progress within an area that we think is worthy of merit based on our own estimations and finding things that we can dedicate our lives to in this time that we have remaining, because all of us are different ages. You know, I'm 34, I'll be 35 next month, or in May rather. You know, so we kind of have to also start with where we are as individuals. So to me, it's really about dedicating ourselves and our resources to something that we can be proud of, and is because we're able to experience the realization of our potential. And I think it's also important to really use parameters to stay focused on having like a general theme for our lives. Sometimes we hear about purpose a lot, and, you know, live your purpose and do things like that. But I think sometimes purpose gets a little bit more complicated, because a lot of times you may not find one ultimate purpose that you just want to live by, you know, right now until you die, but you can construct a series of themes, or a series of things rather, that kind of highlight an overall theme as to how you want to live. And through that, you can then define things that are a little bit more definitive, so to speak. So I believe in just having a well-rounded approach to life, having a flexible approach, taking commitments towards what we want to do. But that's also at the same time making sure that we're flexible. And then that kind of governs how we should use our time, how we should use our money, how we should use our attention, because we're staying engaged and staying centered by focusing on activities that encompass the role that we've designed for ourselves. So that's ultimately, you know, what I think of when I think of using systems for success on a personal level.
Okay. Let's and shout out to Brother Nana Welbeck for the super chat at $10. I thank you so much for the brothers out there. He says, "Peace, Oshay. The variety and quality of content here is excellent." Can you hear me still pretty good?
Oh yeah.
Women? Okay. Let's take us, and thank you, Brother Tony Davis, 999. Take us to some of the first things that you feel that brothers in using the system for success. What are some of the first things that we should be noticing here in your presentation?
Yeah, you know, and one of the things I mentioned was that I don't think that we can really afford to just kind of, you know, freestyle it through life, as I referenced. In other words, I think it's really important that we decide to have an area of focus, because as Black men, we don't really get a lot of second chances. Sometimes we don't have the network to kind of lift ourselves up for when we experience failure. So one thing that is great about us is that we're very resilient as individuals and also as a group. But I think it's really important for us to really make strides within certain niches of a group that is even within the Black community. For example, you know, I listen to a lot of the different streams, and even though there are some talking points that resonate with a lot of us, there are also some things that you can tell are where it's kind of good to kind of work with certain groups of people within those talking points, because you can probably get a lot more progress being made. But usually I would say that the person who's most prepared is the one that will end up having the ability to be most influential. So for me, being systemized for success is having an overall objective, having in mind like a finished product of the way we want to live our lives, deciphering means through which we can express those objectives, and then maintaining a plan for keeping things in order to experience both geometric and incremental progress, and basically putting our time and attention into those things. So it's really about just crafting our lives and being able to be an object of interest, and being able to be a person that other Black men are attracted to, because they see that we have things in order. And there's a number of different areas, you know, that I think that we can apply it to, really all areas. I was, you know, thinking of there's an illustration I was going to use too, and I'm gonna take my long-winded off, but something that I think that could be really powerful, that kind of gives us like a reference point to look at, that I'll also get into as we go on the show too.
Okay. My damn phone is ringing, but take us to some of the other things here that we need to be kind of focused on, brother.
Okay. Yeah, you know, one of the things that I think of when I think of some of the benefits of us trying to use certain systems in order for us to be successful in life is that basically it serves as a hedge against being demotivated. You know, when I think of like even over the last few months, with me trying to get stuff in order and trying to find my lane within the whole thing in the Black manosphere, course, getting the big up from you last year and everything like that. I kind of started off more or less like on a hot streak to a certain extent with the content,
Right.
YouTube and everything. And then at the same time, because I was trying to move and at the same time figure out where I was going to go within this, because it was just kind of something, that was a change of direction for me from previous. I kind of had to really figure out a way to manage things moving forward. And sometimes I wasn't really motivated. Sometimes it was like I'll be having some good stuff that I can put out there, some solid content. But I think that when you already have a system in place, it kind of helps you not have to worry about that too much, because you already have a manageable plan for action.
Well, let me ask you this real quick, because you make a good point, right? And sorry about the phone with the thoughts, but thank you, Brother Deion Gibson. You said last year you came on, you get a lot of momentum going, and you put up some few videos, but then life happened. Life got in the way. Now, let's talk about that, because I want to use you as an example. A lot of times, a lot of black men, even myself, we plan to do something. We want to improve on something. We get an opportunity to do something. Then other things happen that throw us off the course. And now it's like, okay, we got one foot in one place, another foot in another place. How are you able to use a certain system to bounce back in such situations? Because there are a lot of brothers out there that are trying to, go back to school or go back to business, or something have, their mom die or their work schedule change or their work change. How do you get back on track after, such things in life just come out the blue?
Sometimes I think that the more of a support that you actually have, the better. In my case, I don't think it was really that where I really had a support system. I kind of was dealing with it and managing stuff, basically alone, in terms of certain things that I've been trying to get through, and certain things that took place over the winter time. But I guess, ultimately what kind of kept my head in the game is realizing that I had something to share and something to offer, and that I do have something to share and offer that's very valuable. And then B, even just really the fact that having another person believe in you, like when you, put the stamp on it last year, like, listen, this brother's up and coming. There was a part of me that was like, man, I can't, let Oshay down, because even though sometimes certain things I'm not really, up for because life is happening, at the same time, I have, the amount of respect for you. Whereas, like, I also want to make sure that I'm also living up to, not so much living up to the expectations of other people, but at the same time, it's like when somebody is putting some sort of stock in you, and you've already, made a commitment towards something, you want to make sure that you do what you can to make it happen. So even if everything doesn't go according to plan, and maybe if you're not doing things as consistently, you at least got to stay active. So for one of the things for me was making sure that, okay, maybe I'm not producing as much as I want, but I'm making sure that I'm still putting stuff together. I'm still mapping things out. I'm still finding a way to kind of get myself back, so that, if nothing else, I'll be ready to roll when the time is right. Same thing kind of like with when a person is needs to work out and then they don't for a while. If you don't do nothing else, maybe you don't keep that same routine of going 3-4 times a week, but you at least need to make sure you're doing something, even if it ain't nothing but once a week, dropping and doing some push-ups, just so you stay in that frame of mind. Right. So a lot of it for me was just really taking little things to stay within that frame of mind, and then getting back to realizing the power of, wait a minute, if I just take an organized approach of simple things every day, taking a few minutes out to be grateful, taking a few minutes out at night to realize the impact that I can have on other people, doing nothing but putting up a page in Microsoft Word or something else that I'm trying to create. Doing things like that kind of help me to bring things back together.
Let me talk about, I know you said a few minutes or a few seconds. And, sometimes even now, like that I'm in Uganda, and it's a 2-hour time difference, and I'm trying to get adjusted, the sleep pattern, and I'm doing things, and I don't have the access to some things. I'm just trying to take it a day by day and slowly get back into the groove of things and adjust to my environment, as you're talking about, doing those things day by day, and then to try to catch back up to where I was at. Let's talk about how you do things every day, taking it day by day, just to get the system back down, to get organized, to get productive. You talked about a few push-ups. How important is that day by day, just to kind of, get back into the groove of things, to get your own organization to achieve what you want to do, and to maximize every, as much time as you can?
The day by day is really critical, because you have to basically practice the things associated with the things that you ultimately want. And the best way is to make sure that I believe, to make sure that you're always doing something that's associated with your goals. So, if nothing else, before you go to bed, whatever it is throughout the day, I released a video a couple months ago. It was called Baseline Standards. And I think I called it Baseline Standards, the pathway to personal mastery or self-mastery. And basically I was illustrating how because of certain pains that I had associated with not having, a system, with not having a real standard when it came to areas like my finances, when it came to other areas that I experienced years ago, I decided that if nothing else, I was going to have a baseline standard, or, at least a certain thing or a series of things that I would do that anything less would be unacceptable. Because to me, that's really what it's all about, is setting that up. So, for example, one of the things that I highlight in the video was, I remember several years ago, I had got really, really, messed up financially. Like I was, completely messed up, had, barely anything to my name. Account was in the negative. And once I experienced that, one of my baseline standards became, I'm going to make sure no matter what, I'm always saving 10% of my net income. And I've increased it since then. But nonetheless, that simple standard, that simple system of money management has served as a hedge against having things like that happen again. And you can use that reference for any other thing in life that may happen. But to me, it's just about having simple things that you say, you know what, I can see myself at least doing this much. And if I don't do it, I'll feel a little bit bad about it. That's how you can use guilt in your favor. And by doing that, it also kind of keeps you in line so that when you are back on and you're ready to, do your marathons, it won't hurt so much on your muscles, so to speak. You can, because you've already been jogging, you've already been keeping your blood circulating. So that's what it's really been for me, is just doing those simple things that keep me grounded and keep my head in the game.
Okay. So that's a really, really good one, man. I'm glad to hear that. That a lot of you brothers out there needed to hear that part, and I'm so glad to hear that. Let me just go into some of the brothers that have. Shout out to Brother Sean McNulty. Let's talk about some of the other things that you want to talk about in the trading systems, and I kind of ask questions. Thank you, Brother Sean McNulty. Let's talk about some of these other things.
Yeah, man. I try to, when I come on, and even when I'm just talking about anything, for anybody who's kind of familiar with my YouTube channel, that I just really started after that last interview, as far as putting content up. I like to allow myself to be vulnerable and transparent, because I think that it's important for people to know that when we have people who talk on topics, a lot of these people have not gotten to a point where they just arrived and now they're just basically telling everybody else what they need to be doing. I never want to feel as though like I'm at some place where, I'm kind of like, all right, I've done this, and everybody else needs to step it up. So one example of that is I like to talk about how important it was for me to have a hedge against neglect. We talked about being demotivated and how systems can help you when it comes to not being motivated, but also having systems can also help you when it comes to not being neglectful of certain things. So I'll just use an example. This was, I think this may have been around like 6-7 years ago. I remember I had this really bad habit of always getting to work kind of like barely on time. If the shift started at 9 and they give you a 5-minute grace period, I was getting there at 9:04. I ain't late, it still ain't 9:05. That was kind of like my thing. Like whatever little edge they give, I would ride it to the max. So I remember one day, it was a New Year's Eve, first and only time I ever had a car accident. And the reason I actually had this accident was because, like usual, I'm leaving out last minute, trying to get to work, knowing it's going to take me about 25 minutes to get there. But I'm up there, trying to shortcut my way through this other area I can kind of go through. And I ended up kind of cutting through this little lane I wasn't supposed to illegally, and got into a car accident. And it was my ex-girlfriend's whip. And it messed a lot of stuff up, because basically I devalued, her vehicle. And at the same time, it was a financial strain because I had to pay for repairs and the cost of insurance. And I said, if I would have just literally left about 5 minutes earlier, that whole thing would have been avoided. Because I'm lagging and I'm at the house and I'm trying to do whatever I got to do and, ride it out how I usually do, I ended up creating a problem for myself and for somebody else. So that kind of ties into the overall thing that we're using today with how systems could be used for success. Because when we don't, one of my favorite quotes is that neglect starts off as an infection and then it becomes a disease. Jim Rohn, personal development guy, guru, who passed away about 10 years ago. That was one of his famous quotes. But when we are, using things to kind of manage ourselves, to manage our time, to manage our livelihood, when we are using systems, it avoids things like that from happening. So that's just one example that I think that can help, when it comes to using systems. You keep yourself in the game. You don't have to worry about getting demotivated because you're always doing something that keeps you motivated. So you don't have to wait for it to come. And it also protects you against a lot of the negatives, such as being neglectful and also what I call diminishing intent, which is when you may have a lot of hot ideas, you want to do them, but at the same time, the more time you let go, the less interest that you have in those things. And then 2 years later, something that you may have wanted to do, is not as good anymore because you didn't actually roll your sleeves up and get involved. So those are a couple of things that I definitely learned through trying to manage my life with systems.
Let me ask you this, because with some brothers, because even I would feel like not using a system is a system in itself, right? Like being disorganized, it's dysfunctionality, right? But here's the thing, I want to talk to you about something like this because a lot of times when you start using, and I noticed this when you have like head coaches that come into a new NFL team, a new general manager. And back in the 90s, like a system might be like the West Coast offense. And they run this offense, it was a lot of quick passes, short passes, and a lot of, different type of running backs that, were basically catching the ball at the backfield and things like that. And then you would see that they would bring a new system into the organization, and it doesn't necessarily work right away. It takes time to develop. And then, sometimes you would see like the first year they may lose, every game or go 2-14, but then they will stay in the system for another year. They might go 8-8, and then the third year they might go 12-4. Now I have seen situations where some owners cut these coaches or fire them before they can actually turn it around. And similarly, I see a lot of black men, they change to a system where it's a workout system or it's a time management system, and they have a goal to achieve, but the goal is not coming right away. But yet they're still making small improvements, and yet they want to throw a system that's positive right away. Let's talk about giving systems time to develop, and how do you know if a system is actually working good for you as a black man?
That's a great question, O'Shane. It's funny that you used that NFL example because it was something I was going to mention a little bit, kind of in relation to that. But like you said, sometimes when you try to implement something and it's new, and you're not really seeing the results that you want to immediately because you're so used to, let's say, an NFL team that's used to going 10-6 or 11-5, then they bring in this new coordinator and, they got this whole new way of doing stuff. And now the team is 5-11, they can start to doubt and wonder, like, is this thing really going to work? Maybe they don't have like the prototypical quarterback that we're used to. Maybe they have a different one. Maybe, the receivers aren't 6'3", 220. Maybe they're using speedier guys who are like 5'10", 5'11", $190 or something like that. And then you kind of wonder and doubt if something is going to work because you're not getting immediate result. But I think really the best way of trying to evaluate whether a system is really effective is really keeping score. Start to keep score of the things that you're doing that are repetitive, and then just do tallies and see, what, I noticed that when I do X, Y, Z, 1 time out of 10, 2 times out of 10, 3 times out of 10, this happens. Well, maybe if I kind of fine tune this element of my system and then still, have a way of keeping everything essentially the same, but just kind of tighten up on areas, maybe I can start getting results where 7 or 8 times out of 10, this thing happens for me in a positive way. So I think it's really, numbers don't lie, and keeping track of the progress that you're making, but also giving time for something to play out. Like, if you want to get diesel, or if you're trying to lose weight, just saying, all right, I went twice a week and it's not working. I went 3 times a week and it's not working. After a month, I still pretty much look the same, haven't lost weight, haven't really gained no muscle. But you have to commit also and understand that there's going to be a time frame for which your system is going to manifest itself. So doing that as well, I think, is important just as equally. But I'll put it like this, having a substandard system is a little bit better than having none at all. Because even if one isn't, the best way of going about doing things, you can learn along the way and you can always correct course and fine tune. So I would much rather take an organized approach that might be kind of, a little bit slipshod at the beginning versus just having an approach from and just go out there and throw my hands up and expect a miracle to happen.
Let me shout out to brother Koji Duge out of Canada, man. I really thank you for the $2 Canadian super chat. I appreciate that. Brother John says it's pretty sure though. Yeah, I've been working all day, man, so I have had the same thing on, unfortunately. But I will change for my show tonight with Paris Milan. Brother Waymon, let me kind of talk about you talked about keeping score, okay? What I found out with a lot of African American men, and I gotta be hard on, but I don't like being hard on brothers because our brothers already been beat down enough, right? I gotta be real, and brothers are in a position where they can receive the criticism because I also get criticized. I know sometimes Doug, okay, y'all don't know. If I'm doing some crazy shit, I will get an email from Doug real quick. He'll tell me something about the 40 laws of power. I know not to stop with that bullshit, okay? So I'm not the only person that just gets on the mic and don't receive any criticism. But what I find from black men is this. When we keep score, we found out that we're making some improvements, but then we want to compare our success to other people. Like some people may get there, and I'll use my buddy, me and him, we cool, but sometimes I might cuss him out. Wody Maya, okay? Wody Maya has exploded on YouTube in the last recent months. I've been on YouTube longer than him, but man, he is on a whole nother level, right? And I could be a hater and be like, man, why he doing this and he getting this and I'm not getting this. But let's talk about, not giving yourself credit for being in your own lane because everybody is different. Everybody's system is different. And yours might not be working right now like somebody else's, but also, giving yourself credit for what you're doing and then staying out of that situation where you're not comparing yourself to somebody else's system who might be working better in the short time, but you might have a better system long term. A lot of times black men get in that situation where, we are basically comparing ourselves to other people, peers or, people from other races, and they're doing much better, but, we're putting in the same effort and it's not, we're doing better, but it's not doing better as somebody else.
Yeah, man. Excellent point, Oshay. I think that it's important that we realize, that what success means for me, what success means for Oshay, what success means for Aunt James, for Doug, for anybody else that's in the chat, it's not going to be the same across all sectors when we're talking about individual success, because we have to really evaluate our own situations as individuals, even while working as a collective. So, consider your age, consider your beliefs, consider your income, consider your values, your lifestyle restrictions, etc. Consider also what incentivizes you, because what may be feasible for one person may not be feasible for the next. And I think that's why it's important to be satisfied with living in our best way by actually being satisfied with creating roles for ourselves that are very definitive. Because a lot of times, we don't necessarily have a very defined role. And because of that, we think we're supposed to be able to be, like all things to all people and be like the person who can do everything. But sometimes your best success really comes from you just kind of, hitting the pavement with things that work for you and that are already to your advantage that you can excel in. And also, when you look at other people, as you mentioned, I think it's important to realize that whatever you see that person doing is not necessarily all that meets the eye. So, I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was in sales, and I would see some people who, they would start around the same time that I would start, and they would like take off, it would seem, whereas I'm like, man, this dude came in here killing it. You know what I'm saying? He's making thousands of dollars, almost, it seems like in a matter of weeks. And then me, on the other hand, I might be struggling just to get one. But what I didn't see was the work that took place before then. So I didn't see, perhaps the 4 or 5 years of effort that person had, where maybe they weren't really doing their thing. Maybe they were struggling. Maybe they were trying to, it could have been a thing where they were only getting 3 or 4 sales in a year, but they just committed themselves to being a masterful salesperson. And over time, that's what ended up happening. So sometimes it's about realizing that what you see is not always what's going on. It's a story behind a person's success. And also what one person may have as a strength that works for them. Again, you got to use your own system that works for you specifically. So one thing that I think is really important that's going to tell you a lot about yourself is your history. When you look at your own personal history of how you handled yourself in certain situations, what you committed to, if you've given up on things, etc., that is basically going to really tell you the results a lot of times that you can expect. Not saying that people can't make changes, but sometimes your history is a really good fortune teller because it's essentially showing you the habits that you created. So now that you know that, the best thing to do is for you to stick to your own thing and figure out, okay, as a person, how do I now improve upon, this culmination of whom I've become over the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years or so in order to make life work out in my favor.
Mm-hmm. No, that is very, very powerful. That's very, very powerful. Let me kind of get back to you know, also a lot of black men. I don't think that they have this is bad. Shout out to Brother John Downs polo shirt. We try to talk to the brothers, a lot of African American men because they have been, have been beat down. Thank you, brother, for the support. And a lot of brothers are, I would say, they're more unplugged from social constructs than other people. They're more free thinkers than anybody else. So I will give black men credit that. But your system is working, right? And a lot of times people don't. You mentioned it. People don't see the time that you put in. For some of you brothers who are in school right now or are at work or have a business, people don't see the hours that you put in when you're not when you're building something, right? Like when you're really really trying to make sure you make those changes. People don't see the effort behind the scenes you're putting in. But then it's also because they don't see it. It makes it very easy to people to criticize you, make fun of you, try to attack you. And a lot of brothers can get discouraged because outside people could tell you, man, why are you doing that stupid ass shit, man? Like, you see, you're not even getting far with what you're doing right now. And a lot of times other people can kind of discourage you who themselves don't have shit, but they can discourage a brother from, doing what he needs to be doing, which is already working. How is it, how can black men start to not care about what other people think and people who can't see the same vision that you see for yourself? What are some ways that we can deal with that? People who are outside negative detractors, even though they may actually think that they are actually looking out for your best interest.
Right. Sometimes I think people can find themselves in what I call people bondage, where they're held towards or held to rather the opinions of other people, to the extent where it's like your life is kind of based on that and wanting to accommodate them and not be in a position where you're not fitting in. But I think that something that can really be helpful along those lines is just realizing that only you as a person, it's only your responsibility as far as the way that your life turns out. It's nobody else's once you become an adult. So really just taking the bull by the horns and just deciding how you want to live and deciding to, exercise your own freedom that you have as a person, I think is important. And then when you do have some of those negative influences, let's say from maybe friends or family, for example, maybe you might be a person trying to start up a business and, maybe it's taking you, $4,000 or $5,000 to get whatever off the ground. You might have a friend that's looking at you and they see you out here in the trenches and they don't see you really making a profit yet. They might tell you, man, why are you up here wasting your time trying to get that started? You better come over here and get this job that's paying $35 an hour guaranteed, get you this guaranteed money. You know what I'm saying? And they may not understand that you're making a sacrifice in order to have something pay off later on. And a lot of times they really are kind of scared too. So sometimes they may have your best interest, but they might be kind of scared of the evolution that's about to take place within you as a result of you committing to this new self or this new way of going about doing things that makes you say, no matter what, I'm going to make sure I see things through. And if you have negative influences like that, I think it's important to have those conversations, whether it be, whether it's your girl, whether it's one of your parents, whether it's one of your homeboys you came up with, and make them aware of the impact, to a certain extent that it's having on you, and ask them basically to stop and help them to understand, what it is that you're trying to do. And a lot of times some people will begin to separate themselves from you as a result of them seeing how serious you are, because a lot of times they might find that the only things that they kind of had in common with you were some very surface level basic things, and it just carried over for decades. So I think that by you having transparent conversations too, that can also help in help figuring out who's really going to be on your side as well. Even if they don't agree with your method, they should respect your choices.
Let me kind of go into a different level. that I have never went before. Okay, ever in an interview. You know, and I will say this: the NegroManager.com was kind of started based off of professional black men, based off the black men who were not well represented, you know, in media. The guys that nobody was talking about, the business owners, the good brothers, the doctors, the lawyers, the black men that are out there in Black America that nobody wants to recognize. What I found out is that as we have built this community, other people who might not be representative of that crowd have also wanted to join in with us. And that has been the brothers who have come out of a bad situation, maybe coming out of prison, maybe, you know, having a felony and they want to come back into society. Now, one of the things that I do know, and obviously I can't really kind of speak to this because I've never been in a situation, but we do have brothers that have been in jail and they want to come back out into society and do good and do well. And as you know, once you have that felony, um, it's hard to get into, you know, even low employment. And then you have people who are trying to get you to go back to the block. And shout out to Brother Craig. Craig, I'm gonna call you back. That's my brother right there. We have people wanting to get you to go back to the block, go back and do certain things. That increases their recidivism rate. Now, I will take ownership that we have not talked about these kind of important things on this channel. We have left behind these sort of black men out there that are looking for answers to stuff like this, and we have not provided those solutions. So I want to put this on your lap. If this is a brother that has had situations, and it could not be you, it could not be me, but it could be somebody that's listening to this podcast. They want to get out, they want to develop a system for themselves. They're having some tough times, you know, trying to get into employment. They're having a tough time with somebody to give them an opportunity, a network, to have that felony on their record or whatever. You know, what can these black men do, you know, in such situations where, you know, they want to do the right thing, they have talent, could have made a mistake or whatever, and they're trying to get back out there and they can't, and then they have their homeboys telling them, yo, man, like, you know, hey, you know, come back on the block, you know, and make, you know, $2,000 a day. What advice would you give somebody like that?
You know, that's a real good topic to bring up, man, because I think about that a lot sometimes. Like when we are experiencing our own happiness and our own successes, sometimes we can forget that there are tons of other brothers out there incarcerated, and maybe we think, well, if I'm in the streets, you know, I mean, hey, that's the choices that they made, and or if I ain't doing this, then you know, that ain't my situation. That may be true, you know, but at the same time, you know, it's going to resonate with you different when it's somebody that you know personally, you know, when it's your brother, when it's your cousin, you know, that you came up with, when it's one of your friends. And, you know, some people, you know, they're in certain situations because they put themselves in that situation. Some people, I think that sometimes the penalties can be a bit severe for what it is that they've done. But for brothers who are trying to, you know, get back on and say, you know what, man, I just did X amount of time and you know, I'm actually trying to put forth efforts. I think it's important to just take advantage of whatever opportunities that are there in front of you, and just start from there. If I'm not mistaken, it was I think it was a guy, I can't remember his name exactly, but I think he wrote a book called Cooked. And I think he had spent like 10 years or so in prison. And, you know, he was basically saying that he was like a drug dealer. He did like a dime in a pen and basically came out and used kind of like those principles in a way to actually become like a world renowned chef. And I thought that was really cool. So maybe he's coming out and maybe he doesn't, a brother's coming out, he doesn't really have the lucrative opportunity necessarily, but whatever opportunities you do have, use those opportunities. And I think it's also important to begin pouring your life and your experience back into other people. So I'm really big on like using some form of volunteerism, letting your life be an example, both a positive and also from the negative examples. But I think a life of contribution, a life of constant learning, and also a life of commitment towards being able to build upon what is available for you and being grateful for what you have goes a long way in that regard for brothers who are in that situation.
Okay. But let me do this real quick. For those people who do not know of Waymon Brown the Great, okay? He's been on my platform a few times, but I'm trying to get the brother to get to, let's see what we have here. 300 subscribers, right? So I need 40 people, if we can, or more, to subscribe to Brother Waymon Brown in the chat, right? Hit the link. I see my brother Craig Harper Me and Craig Harper had a really, really good talk the last night. I'll try to bring the brother on today, and we'll discuss what he's doing and using the system to turn tipsytulips.com. All right, and we want to talk to him about that. But I would like to get you brothers to subscribe to Waymon Brown. Right, we have some of the most talented Black men, and because of you brothers have supported this community, whether it's your time, financially, or sharing, we have a lot of brothers. Even Oshay Linus comes on and talk. We have Black men now that are addressing our issues from this point of view. 3 years ago, you could not get a podcast called How Black Men Can Use Systems for Success. We simply did not have people who were willing to do content like this. Now in 2019, we have specific shows dedicated to African-American men that will tell us how we can do things as a group, and we acknowledge and put our needs and necessities first. And now we have guys like this that are coming into the fold that have different ways of doing things, different ways. They're building the content up that we can help and bring other Black men in. I think it's a beautiful thing. So let's go ahead and subscribe. Our timeout's concurrent. Depending on the day, I guess. You know what I mean? But so let's help him get to more subscribers here if you can. Let me check out Brother Waymon. He has 260. Can we get him to? We got 268. Okay, that's not good enough. I like to see if we can get him to 300. Okay, so 32 more. Brother Waymon, let me talk about what you see. Let's leave Black men kind of to the side for a second.
Mm-hmm.
What do we see in some of the other guys? Like I'm in Africa right now. I see some of the Chinese people here with their systems. I see what the manufacturing that they're doing. I see some of the things they're doing. What systems do you think that we can look at other groups of men that are doing pretty good? Doesn't matter if they're white, and Asian men, and things. What are some of the other guys that you see as other groups? What systems do you think that they use that work so well that we could learn from? If you talk about anybody that you want to talk about right now.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the thing is with these other groups, of course, as we know, most of them have their culture intact. And even though there are things that I think we can borrow, from them or adopt, I also think that in order to make those practices lasting, is not really just as simple as like, okay, here's the playbook, this is what they use. We can use the same thing and copy and paste it sometimes. And I think that's because what they have that makes them specifically successful are values that resonate within the group of people, who are around. So like you said, like with the Asians, or whether you're talking about like Turkish men or any other group of men, they basically have systems that work that speak to them as men as a part of their cultural group. However, if we're going to take on some things that are just like some best practices and things like that, I think a lot of times, just in my own observation, even locally, I notice like there's different community groups and things like that I've been a part of. And one thing that I noticed that I really liked about specifically within this particular group of basically is a group mostly of white guys, but I noticed just from my own observation that they seem to be very resourceful about, trying to help each other out. So whether it was some insider information about something that somebody needed, or, it really anything that could help further a person. I think that is something to be commended because they didn't really seem selfish about sharing, about basically putting somebody on, about being able to help somebody to advance their career, etc. And I'm sure they still have competition among themselves as men usually do. But nonetheless, I think that they also have figured out that it's important that in some capacity, everybody gets some type of a win that's a part of this group. So even something that simple as, what, you always turn around, you see these people having these conversations to put somebody on and maybe something that could be helpful, whether it be a financial thing, a business opportunity, a job, things like that. I think that we could really excel by adopting that sort of state of mind, because even before, I think on one of our earlier shows when we talked about developing the empowerment culture, like back in the fall, we talked about how important it was to be resourceful. And that's one of the things that always stands out to me, because it doesn't really cost much to be resourceful with your information. It doesn't cost much just to be resourceful and wanting to share something with somebody. So those are some things that I definitely noticed that some other groups seem to do. But again, sometimes it's hard to really make the comparison only because we've been stripped of that. But they pretty much came over here with it intact. And so one thing that I would say is that would be even paramount to adopting some of their ideologies would be for us to actually have basically a template of a culture that we can all adopt and that pretty much works in our favor and that already speaks to the soul of Black men.
Okay. What are some of the things that if you were to create this particular culture or system, what were some of the things that you would put in it? If you could do it, what would you do?
Yeah, I would probably go back to the things that we were talking about in the fall when we had that show. It was a real interesting show. I think that was the second show I did, and you had me on as a lead off one evening. Had a lot of people on there. I know George, Clutch, MOT was on there. Moses Jenkins. Forgive me if I'm leaving anybody. A couple other people on there too. George, he was on there. But the things that I was really highlighting is I created that content based on things that I thought that could be very feasible, which were, basically edifying each other, being resourceful towards each other, and having a collaborative spirit. And basically what that pretty much meant was making sure that we can take time out to recognize each other, making sure that we can take time to help each other where we can, especially when you see somebody else is trying to do something positive, and also where you can work together because nobody else really wants to deal with us like that anyway. So, and I looked at that as like being like a catalyst towards those other major things. Like, okay, let's say we put all our money together and now we want to put up an actual formal economic structure, or now we want to try to get some legislation passed. If you already had those things in order, and it's already a normal practice where it's normal to run into a Black man, you expect that, he's going to have a certain amount of edification for you. Not saying that he is old, but that's just a part of the culture and that you're going to give it in return. Or you expect a certain degree of, if you can connect on something with a brother where it's a good fit, that you collaborate. Where you expect a brother, to be resourceful, and where you expect to also, and you can, kind of rally around those things. So those would be probably like the main elements for where we are right now that I would actually build upon. Those aren't just always those aren't the whole long-term things, but those would be good starting points to actually master, I believe.
All right, my bad. I had myself on mute. Let me kind of get back into, when it comes to, let's talk about this a little bit, right? As far as sharing systems, because a lot of brothers I noticed, and you talked about the culture of sharing. And thank you, brother Tony Davis, subscribing, Nana for subscribing, Gary, and brother Kalawinje. I don't know where are you from, brother, with that last name, Ndu Tewapo. Are you from South Africa? But what I've noticed is we may have a system that works. Like I said, the Indians and guys in those cultures are more likely to share it. Black men, when we find out what works, we are not really a group of people. Up until I've seen this a little bit more recently, though, because of the internet, we're not really a lot of people that like to share a whole lot of secrets with one another. Why do you think that happens so much with amongst Black men?
Sometimes it goes back to that thing of wanting to be that dude where you don't really have to deal with too much competition. Especially if you're in a space where there aren't a lot of other Black men available, maybe a work environment, especially, you kind of are not saying that brothers are necessarily think like this, but a lot of Black men are almost, kind of happy to be that token Black man. And some of them who may not necessarily be the token Black man, who may have, actually did a lot of things and competed equally with other people to get where they are, they want to stand on that platform themselves. And I think a lot of it just comes down to historically, particularly in this country, scarcity has always been a big issue for us, so being able to have an opportunity where you can have something for yourself, a lot of times it could be within a brother's spirit, sometimes to just kind of hoard it to himself. And I think that just comes back to that cultural piece where, if you do have a culture that's intact that involves other people, then you look at the wins and losses that you experience as being mutual wins and mutual losses. But when you're basically just kind of like out and about doing your thing as just an individual, you pretty much using that same Eurocentric approach of like survival of the fittest and get what you can while you can get it. And that's not even really, I don't even really think that that is who we are. I think it's largely who we've become because of our exposure to being in the situation that we're in. I do think that we're pretty tribal, in nature, that we are collaborative as well, and that we would ideally want to live differently with each other. But it's kind of hard to like let that guard down for some brothers when you've only experienced life in a certain way or only had certain experiences. So I think that's a really key piece as we move forward, is figuring out a way to be comfortable with being interdependent with each other, recognizing the wins and losses as being mutual.
Mm-hmm. Okay, do me a favor. Let's get the more Waymon Brown to subscribe. I need 24 people. I know we have 130 people right now watching, but let's see if we can get some more subscribers to the brother. Let's like the video. 9 more likes will get us to 100 likes, and we can definitely appreciate that, you being in the chat today. Again, thank you to all the people that have subscribed to the brother, and all the people that are watching right now. We definitely appreciate you. We know we'll get a lot of good playback on this. I guess I don't know, Brother Waymon, what other things that maybe we didn't talk about today that we could talk about today as far as this? Anything else on your list?
Well, earlier when you mentioned the point about using systems, and how sometimes you can go from like one system to another system, and then maybe people don't buy into it as much because they're not seeing the results. I kind of thought about that, and I said, imagine kind of like right now we're in free agency right now with the NFL, and I said, it's a really interesting time because a lot of moves that are taking place sometimes to me are even more exciting than the actual season themselves, because it makes you think of new possibilities. And I kind of think of like, imagine if everybody here is essentially an NFL athlete, free agency just begun. We might be coming off of some rookie deals. Maybe we had like 1-year contract deals where we were trying to prove it, but now we all have an opportunity to actually get a long-term lucrative contract. And we're going to know that a lot of our negotiations are going to be based on our past performance and the upside of our current skill sets. And maybe the contracts that we get, we all on the same team, let's say, for an example, as free agents, and they might have some kind of modest base salaries, but they might have elite earning potential, but they don't really come with a lot of guaranteed money. The reason I think it's important to kind of have that kind of be like a reference is because when we're in a situation like that as an athlete, it helps us stay in the headspace to help us understand that our job is not here to stay just because you earned a spot on the roster. And so when I think about using systems for success in order to help us achieve certain results, it makes me think along those lines as well. Like, here it is that as long as we're doing the rudimentary things and we're showing up every day and we're investing into those 4 or 5 elements of our game, like if you're a wide receiver, you need to be good at catching, at pass blocking, at route running, things like that. But everything is going to really be contingent upon the efforts that you put in, day out. And, just as easily as the team signed you, they can also cut you without hitting the salary cap too much. And that kind of, I think, helps you keep your head in the game, realizing that you can still be a competitor, realizing that there is a lot of upside, but you also want to make sure that you're paying attention to those elements that make you a great player. And so, for us, for example, with us using our own systems for success, I think about choosing upon maybe just about 4 or 5 or 6 areas of your life that you can say, I'm going to make a commitment towards these specific areas, and then kind of making like components of what make that area or what makes that area something that you can consider to be a success. So, for example, how we touched on, how everybody has a different situation. What's successful for you may not be what's successful for me, and vice versa. So say if you got a brother, maybe he's approaching his 30s, maybe he doesn't have children or anything like that. He has pretty decent health. His overall theme for life might be that he eventually wants to create some sort of journey of entrepreneurship for himself. So in order to do that, he needs to kind of start looking at what are the areas of life that I need to be focused on to make sure that all those areas are tight, so that I can make sure that I got a space on the roster. So he probably needs to be a good money manager. He probably needs to be somebody who stays in shape. He needs to be somebody who's mentally stable. And he also needs to be a person who's going to be a social influencer. So in order for him to start, looking at all those different areas, then he has an opportunity to decide, well, how am I going to manifest those areas to show, what can I do, for example, in the way of my mental stability? Maybe I need to learn how to concentrate better. Maybe I need to have more of an appreciative or grateful attitude when I wake up in order to influence people socially more. Maybe I need to start working on being a better networker. Maybe I need to start being a more benevolent person. Maybe I need to maybe add another second or third stream of income to supplement where I want to go while I'm en route. And then once the whole idea is basically to start kind of packaging your life where you pretty much know what you're doing every day. Your real occupation is living by the template that you've already carved out for yourself, so that you have something that you can be proud of, and you have something that you can work on for the next 36 months, the next 5 years, etc. And then just kind of break those action steps down one by one into a series of daily things, weekly things, monthly things that you can carry out. And I think it's important to be definitive. And I also think it's important to kind of not really focus on what everybody else is doing, but use the process of elimination approach. Figure out what things are really important to you, what resonates with your values, and then stick to making a life for yourself based on those things. And your situation, again, is going to be different for the next person. And then the next thing I think that's really important, Oshay, is what I call non-refundable deposits, is to put as much effort into whatever that thing is or whatever those things are that are going to be the difference makers, so that it starts to lock you in and glue you in to the commitment that you've made within those elements of your game, so to speak. So if you already know, that you need to be a certain type of way in order to succeed, do whatever it takes in order to already lock yourself in, so that later on you don't get distracted by other things. And then that's kind of like what makes you kind of fall off course a bit. So I think it's just more about having a grip on life, not letting life happen to us, but making it happen for us. And ultimately, that's like the whole name of the game that I think is important, to make sure that we have regular routines that we can use to help us in that regard. That's kind of like the main theme of the show today.
Okay. And brother, you did a wonderful job, man, as breaking it down and presenting it to the brothers here today. I definitely appreciate you coming on, and I know it's been somewhat of a long time, but because you had things going on in your life, but definitely you are a very, very talented brother. And like I said, 2-3 years ago, we could never get a topic like this and somebody to speak to it. But it's just been the expansion of brothers like yourself that have come in and helped develop this space, so that a lot of black men now can, for the kind of content that they want, they can just basically, they want to get the dating coaching thing, if they want to have a podcast, a call-in show. A lot of brothers now, they can really get the content that they need. And it's growing. It's slow, right? A lot of times, but we're growing with the market for the brothers and for the needs of what African American men are going through. So I definitely thank you for coming on, man. Anything else that you want to compliment on or comment on, or anything else you want to say to the people?
That was most of it. I just want to definitely say, I just appreciate everybody for the support. It's interesting now that I've started to find my place within the black male media space, and the responsibility that I look at now having. Whereas before, I was kind of creating some stuff more or less on my blog, and there were times where I was doing things that were monetizable. Then sometimes where I was doing things just to basically put stuff out there to make sure that people can benefit from the information. But shows like this, I think I actually really needed to do this show, Shay, because like I said, when even with me having this information and putting things into practice, when you're kind of doing stuff, by yourself, sometimes it's kind of hard. Sometimes it could be discouraging to keep yourself focused and to keep yourself centered. But I know that there are a lot of people out there also who are dealing with some things that are not so favorable in life. And I would just really say that I want everybody to really stay encouraged. There's might be some things going on that maybe nobody else knows about. And you really got to make sure that you're handling those things, and really just try to stay encouraged. And where you can, don't let yourself get into a slump. That's the big thing, because sometimes when you just kind of let yourself, get into a series of days and weeks, eventually you can end up getting depressed, or eventually you just kind of end up, losing interest in a lot of things. So, even on a day like today, maybe, some of you work Monday through Friday type of gig, and this is kind of like your time to take off and just kind of unwind. Try to do something, anything that could be helpful towards you. Try to do anything that could help you within the steps that you need to take. Really, it's those small decisions, those detailed decisions, that I think are going to be the major difference maker. When you need to eat different, then you decide to eat a piece of fruit instead of eating some junk food. Something like that is really practiced over a period of time that's going to really be helpful in the long run. So I just want to say, you know, I definitely appreciate the opportunity. I have to make sure that I'm doing whatever I need to be doing, you know, within my own system to be as productive as I can possibly be as well. And again, just everybody, I appreciate the support. There's more content coming out on the YouTube channel pretty soon. As a matter of fact, I have at least one video that I'm going to be dropping over this weekend between today and tomorrow. A few more. I'll probably be putting out one maybe a couple times a month, you know, at a nice pace, because I like to give a lot of thorough information on my topic most of the time. So it's not really so much about putting them out so often, but really just making sure that when I put them out, that it's good stuff. And I definitely salute to everybody that's always been commenting on the channel, and everybody's been showing love and support. So I just want to give a big up to everybody and say, you know, wherever you are, just try to keep yourself, you know, as glued in as you possibly can. Realize that you are very important. Realize that you are needed, and you know, give yourself a new day to make things happen, and it'll be a brighter tomorrow for you. So I just want to say one love to everybody, and I appreciate you again for having me on, Oshay.
All right, brother. And again, I do thank you, you know, for coming on and everything. Damn, my camera messing up. But guys, so shout out to everybody. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again, Brother Waymon. A great show. And I want to say that we will have, I believe, another show on tonight. I got to go meet some people for this, but I will see you guys later on tonight. Thank you for the show. Thank you for being here. Peace out, brother. Thank you so much.
Peace and love, y'all.